over to Tara Kinney, the CEO of Atomic Revenue, and she will lead us on this hopefully fruitful and actionable discussion. So let's get to it, everybody.
Well, thank you, Philip. And thank you, everybody, for setting this up. I hope that everyone can hear. If you have any challenges or questions, or if something needs to be discussed further for you, please post a note in the chat, and Philip will continue to answer questions or ping us and let us know that we need to spend a little more time answering a question. But as Philip mentioned, I'm Tara Kinney, owner and CEO of Atomic Revenue. I'm excited to bring together a panel of experts. I love this time of year. Strategic planning and budgeting, it is like a fresh start to all the things that are possible. However, it is always a very challenging time for organizations, and it's also a time of reflection where you wonder if all the planning and budgeting you did last year was for naught, and whether or not you can improve on it this year and maybe achieve your goals this year with this plan and budget. So I'm glad to bring together this panel of experts who are all part of the Atomic Revenue Collaboratorium. And I'll let each person introduce themselves, and they're all here to talk about the aspects of building a budget that supports your strategy in the areas of sales, marketing, and tech stack. So Simon, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I think I've done probably a pretty shoddy job of that already, but let's try and reset the thing here. I am a chief sales officer, fractional chief sales officer, I should call it, and co-founder of a business called Libra Partners. I have worked in public and private businesses as the chief sales or chief revenue officer for 25 years, dare I say it. I've sat on the boards of every business, either executive board or management board of every business I've worked for in the last 25 years. And in the last, dare I add even more years, 5 years, I've been working as this fractional leader to help smaller and mid-sized businesses with their sales strategy and challenges with sales management regarding their team.
And Susan.
Hello, everybody. I am a fractional CMO based in Chicago. I've got decades of experience in the business. I'm not putting a number against it today, but it's a lot. And I've working with a wide range of businesses. My focus as a fractional CMO is primarily on small businesses and owner-operator kinds of businesses. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
And Jeremy.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jeremy Steinbring. I'm the founder of RevOps. We specialize in Salesforce, HubSpot, tech stack implementation, as well as RevOps strategy. Personally, I have a very wide range of experience from marketing and sales and customer success, mainly in the tech and SaaS world. So I'm used to high level of chaos, not a lot of planning, and trying to make sense of it all. And so that's my specialty.
Jeremy's a good person to talk to if the things you've budgeted for and planned don't work on the tech stack side. Then you get to spend a lot of money with Jeremy. So really this whole topic is not serving your core base, although I'm sure you wish people would come to you with better planned tech stacks to start with. Well, I'm excited to bring together this group as I work with leadership teams around the country, really trying to help them achieve their business goals. This budgeting and strategy planning time is always critical to their success. And sometimes it doesn't get enough attention, and sometimes it is all consuming. And in either scenario, it doesn't always produce the outcomes that they were hoping to achieve. So we're going to try to address some of those challenges and set everyone on this call either on a path of success or help you as you're finalizing your budgets and plans for next year and trying to tie them all together, looking at it from a different lens. So let's kick off here with the first question that I wanted to ask our panel, just with all the years of experience that everyone here has. Tell us about some of the successful budgeting and planning processes that you have been through. What made them a success and who built the budget? The who. So Simon, do you want to kick off that one?
Sure. I might start in a slightly different way. I might tell you how not to do your budget before I tell you how to do your budget. So how not to do your budget is to do it top down, i.e. have the CFO or CEO say, right, this is the number we've got to meet. So everything else has to kind of flow up into that without a lot of thought. Believe it or not, I've seen that many times, and I can give you a very concrete example of an organization. It was a publicly traded company. And I joined them right at the beginning of the year, and they'd set their budget, obviously, the year before. And my responsibility was heading up the sales and marketing teams and really owning the whole revenue stream, obviously. And I was told we had a goal of $10 million for the year in revenue. And I said to them, okay, so what did you achieve last year? And the answer was $3 million. So I said, okay, and what's changed between last year and this year that means that you were going to over triple our revenue? And the answer was, well, nothing's changed. It's the same. So I said, okay, well, that's a big jump. And the answer was, well, listen, that's what we promised the shareholders. That all flows down from basically what the shareholders have been promised, what the analysts are expecting. So your job is to kind of make that happen. I worked incredibly hard. Everybody on my team worked incredibly hard. And it won't be a spoiler to tell you we did not hit $10 million, right? The number was just silly. And it was a top-down number. So the way to do it properly is to build it as much as possible bottom up. And what I mean by that is if you've got history with your sales organization, you've got your product history, you know how long it takes to close deals, you know how long roughly the deal size is, you know how good your individual salespeople are, then you've got some baselines from which to work. And you need to build it from that basis. How many deals can we close? How many salespeople do we have? How do we increase the productivity of our salespeople? What do we need to do to make that happen, right? A golden rule I set for everybody is do not hire a single additional salesperson until you know your existing team are what you want to keep and are really humming along at perfect efficiency. And if you can't answer that question, just simply adding a whole bunch of salespeople is not going to grow your revenue. You need to go back and you need to look at your sales process. You need to decide who needs training. You might need to replace members of the team or move them around. So build your budget from the bottom up. And that way you will stand a good chance of succeeding, is what I would say.
And Simon actually published a blog on atomicrevenue.com, so you can go look at it about labor planning in sales. Labor planning is definitely one of the expenses, and many companies do start with their revenue number or their sales number and set the budget to that. But Susan, tell us about marketing. Isn't marketing supposed to tell us what the market potential is? Where does marketing fit into this budgeting story?
Well, marketing is much, much more than MQLs and SQLs. Marketing, similar to what Simon is saying with taking a bottom-up approach, I embrace that because you do want to look at all of the different components of the marketing activities, all of the campaigns and the digital marketing initiatives and content creation, SEO. But like I said, it's not just MQLs and SQLs, and it's also not just a lead story, it's a conversion story. So it really is taking that bottom up approach. Really, it needs to take that holistic look, a little bit bigger point of view.
Can I add here? Sorry, so I agree with that, Susan, entirely. And I think one of the things that's very important in doing this is having everyone on the same page, right? So, having sales and marketing working very closely together, because that way, and looking at the individual budgets, looking at them, in a holistic way, saying, okay, well, how are we going to achieve these goals? And by the way, the goals for salespeople, in my opinion, should be stretchy, but they should be achievable. Another thing that people get wrong is that they say, okay, we're going to set these, well, a bit like the $10 million, right? All the salespeople looked at that and said, okay, at the beginning of the year, okay, well, we're not going to make that, so that's a waste of time then. And they're disincentivized at the very beginning of the year rather than incentivized and motivated to stretch for it.
So I appreciate this perspective from Simon and Susan, who are hitting on the labor components and the tactical components of marketing and sales, and all of those things today happen using technology. So I'd love to hear Jeremy's perspective on how the Susans, Simons, and other business leaders of the world should be budgeting for their tech stack in order to accomplish and support these initiatives that they're thinking about.
Totally. Well, and I think what Simon and Susan said are really important for their respective departments. I think if you're looking at it from a sales leader, marketing leader, CS leader, product team, finance, all of that's really important. What I'm thinking about is how are I subsidizing human capital with tools? Because that's what's going to allow a company to develop a huge pipeline, more revenue than just throwing bodies at it, similar to what Simon was saying. And if I don't say, Simon says, build bottom up at least once in this guy, it's just, you have to when your name is Simon. Sorry, Simon. It's going to be like the third time I'm going to do that. But yeah, so like for me, I'm thinking about not how you're budgeting individually, but how you're budgeting as a whole. And that is really the RevOps philosophy, right? It's about how your different go-to-market teams work together and how all of these decisions rear their ugly head is in the tech. And so when we're helping customers try to figure out what tools to invest in, which ones to consolidate, which ones are worth the investment that you're making in them, we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And what I find most of the time is that we overcomplicate our tech and we overspend. And I think there's really two problems. One, I think most of the time we have a lack of education about what some systems can do. So for example, in a tool like HubSpot or Salesforce, you may be able to customize them to create maybe 70, 80% of what you need another tool that you would go out and buy and have a separate contract to do. Custom objects, custom automation, reporting, things that come out of the box, but you don't know what you don't know. And so I think a lot of the times when we're talking about annual planning, going through the exercise of writing down every system that you use, when is the renewal date, how many licenses are you paying for if it's a SaaS-based product, what an estimate utilization, right? Just like 25%, 50%, 75%, 100. Anything 25 and low-hanging fruit candidate to get rid of. And what I find is when you dive a little deeper and you say, oh, we have this tool, these 3 people use it. Is it revenue generating? Is it helping you reach your goal? Or is it just a nice to have because someone was used to this tool in another company and they really like to have it? We're seeing a lot of this with AI systems. And I know I'm going down a rabbit hole now, but a lot of businesses aren't ready for AI. It's just the new shiny object that they've decided to purchase. And so if you think about it, like, is the tool helping your team reach your goal? Are you utilizing that tool? 9 times out of 10, when we start working with customers, they may start with 30, 40 systems. We can identify 4 or 5 that can just be nixed. And there you go. You've saved 10, 20, 30 grand. So I think it's about purpose for the system. I think it's about thinking about how the team utilizes the system and educating yourself on what is possible and how we can get rid of a lot of the bloat.
And Jeremy, is it okay if I ask questions?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
No questions from Simon. Simon only says.
Simon also asks.
That's right, Simon.
So, I mean, one of the things that I see a lot, Jeremy, and I just am curious whether you see the same thing, is that, I mean, you mentioned sort of overcomplication, which I see all the time. There's all good intent when you buy a CRM system, and then you want every single report out of it. And you build the most ridiculously complicated set of, inputs that are required in order to generate the reports out of the other end, and actually people don't use it. But do you see duplication of systems? I mean, one of the problems I see is that if each department independently is writing down their sort of Santa Claus list for what they want, then and there's no coordination across them, then you end up with systems that don't talk to each other, right? So you're immediately losing that leverage point, and you end up with really just wasting money. Is that replicated? Do you see that too?
Every time. It's the reason I have a job, frankly, and just because everyone runs into. And I think it's important to call out, it is natural. Like, as a founder CEO, your job is to support your people who support your people who support your customer. In order to do that, you need to enable them. You need to give them systems, everything. And so, like, the intention is good, but if you don't have that RevOps system strategist sitting at the center that can help coordinate. So if you're sales and you say you need this type of reporting, and then you're in marketing and you say you need this type of reporting, and you're looking at two different tools, you can sit there and say, well, Salesforce can do both. So why are we getting two SaaS products to integrate? We have more dollars. I also think, one of the biggest issues, it's not just about budget, it's the time cost. The more complicated things are, the harder it is to train your team. And I'm sure for the people here listening, take HubSpot or Salesforce, for example. Oh yeah, I have HubSpot Salesforce experience. Every org you go into is so customized that it operates completely differently. So if you can imagine, every team that you've ever joined has a different tech stack used in a different way for different reasons. The more that you add, the time wasted in training and getting people like comfortable doing their jobs using their tech stack is astronomical. Not to mention the cost of the tool, the technical debt, the effect that it has on the data being accurate. The more integrations you have, the more hands it touches, the more likelihood that mistakes are made. And then what I usually end up finding, a good telltale sign of this is if you and your team are more comfortable putting thing into a Google sheet or an Excel sheet, you have this problem, and you could benefit from this exercise.
And
sure.
that's sometimes the best thing about annual planning, is because it's an opportunity for all of these department heads to get together and actually talk to each other, and compare their list of their must-have technology, talk about the reason why. It's especially a beautiful thing when the sales and the marketing team talk to each other. Sadly, it doesn't always happen more than once a year, but to me, that's the best thing about the marketing. And it gives a chance for everybody to get on the same page, and also it puts some reality into the discussion as to who it is that drives the strategy, who it is that drives the budget. A little bit of dueling goes on, but it's a good discussion to have.
It's a negotiation. And what I love that I'm hearing here is what I also experience and see on various leadership teams. The budgeting process is very tactical. We're looking at labor, we're looking at every investment that we want to make, every advertising dollar spent, every user license, and every piece of technology. And so when you are looking so deep in the weeds at all the budget line items, lots of times we lose track of what I would consider the middle budget impacts, which we alluded to, which is labor savings. Labor is still our most expensive budget item, and people spend or cut in every area except for labor properly. That's one of the key areas that I find all leaders have an opportunity to improve on, is where we have opportunity costs, wasted time, the wrong people, wrong seats. Who do we need to hire? What does that do to our numbers? Do we even have accurate roles and responsibilities, or are we scaling chaos? So let's go even another step higher and say, when budgeting is so tactical and has so many cross-department impacts that have to be integrated, how do we make sure that all of these conversations and negotiations and analysis are aligned to a business strategy? Right? Like, where is the business even trying to go? And are we budgeting for change, or are we budgeting for numbers? Susan, you want to start this one?
I mean, there's so many colors of strategy that we could be talking about. And is it the go-to-market strategy? Is it the positioning strategy? Is it the brand strategy? Is it the sales strategy? That again, the joy of having everybody in the same room and talking to each other is really when the decision needs to be made, when the pedal hits the metal. Is marketing, and back to the very first question that we had, is marketing driving strategy, or is sales driving strategy, and to what end? So if we can, a go-to-market strategy, is the best thing about that is that it really is a blend of both marketing and sales efforts, ideally in a free and open dialogue. The positioning a positioning strategy is much more marketing driven, and the brand strategy kind of goes into an even bigger, looking at a bigger arena. So that is the first question that really needs to be addressed. The big question that needs to be addressed is kind of who is driving the bus, and that likely needs to be a top-down decision, but it also is driven largely by the kind of talent we've got to work with.
Listen, I think I agree with that. I think the thing is with strategy is, I mean, the first question needs to be asked, do you have a strategy, right? That's the first thing. Does the business actually have a strategy? I know that sounds ridiculous, but you wouldn't believe the number of companies I've been involved with where they don't really have one. They have sort of tactics and goals, but they don't really have an overall strategy. But let's assume you do. After that, does everyone in the company understand what that strategic goal, that strategy actually is? Or is there any confusion with it? Because when you get down to the level of budgeting and everyone is looking at their own budgets, if they are not all aligned in terms of what the overall business strategy is, and you talked about, your sales strategy, the marketing strategy, and so on, those all need to roll up into the overall and be aligned with the overall strategy of the company, right? And again, that can go wrong. I've seen it where the business has a stated strategy, and then the underlying departments are sort of either in slight conflict or not working cohesively to the same strategy because they kind of got their own agenda going on. And that, I think, can be a problem, obviously.
Well, or you can have a sales-driven strategy that is nothing more than a sales number.
Yeah.
And I've seen that also far too often. A sales goal is not a strategy.
No.
And the basic definition of strategy is how. You want to define how you're going to get there. So in sales-driven organizations, it can really muddy the waters.
I think that this is something that a lot of folks get wrong, frankly. I think data needs to drive insights, which then drive strategy. often we're going and building strategy and budgets based on feeling. I feel like we need more sales. I feel like we need more marketing. But most of the organizations that I work with, it's the exact opposite. Like we don't have customer success represented on this call. I think that's usually one of the biggest drivers for whether someone can actually grow their revenue. Especially in tech and SaaS, we're seeing that the companies that have like superb retention scores and a lack of churn are the ones that are succeeding, because now that we're moving to this ecosystem influenced led growth, that's how people are buying. We need to create really great experiences, but it should be the data and getting information from your customer data, which then tells you what the strategy should be, because you need a problem, right? If there's no problem, there's no point to strategize a solution for it. So the data is going to surface what's working well and what's not. And you need to have a really solid core tech stack of data that you can trust to then help give you some feedback about how your business is operating, which will then lead to, okay, we have a big problem with awareness, right? Like our website traffic is down. We're not getting a lot of internal, we're not getting a lot of demos. We need to make sure that people know we exist. Okay, well, we have data to prove that that is the most important thing that we need to focus on this year, and that should drive where the investment is going, whether it's in people and human capital, technology, consulting firm, whatever. But I think a lot of times it's almost like an afterthought. It's like, well, it's kind of like the defense budget for the US. It's like, okay, well, we spent $1 billion in sales last year. We need more sales, so let's increase that by 20%, and let's just keep spending on that department because it's what we feel that we need.
Jeremy, you presented an interesting argument, but is your bottom line that operations should drive strategy?
I'm way too biased to answer that question. Data totally should drive, I guess, should more give you insights around the problem, which would influence strategy, is if you wanted to be more technical. You still need great sales, marketing, customer success minds and leaders to know how to fix a problem. But I think a lot of people skip over realizing what the problem is.
I agree with data. I just don't think it's necessarily operational data. Listen, data plays a part in all of this stuff, right? I absolutely think everything from measuring whether you're succeeding, you need to look at data. But I suspect Susan would be arguing, listen, there's a lot of other data like market research data and so on that we need to use to inform. So I agree with the word data, right, in terms of strategy. But I'll end it there. And yes, you are biased, Jeremy. So
I know my own weaknesses. That's step one.
Yeah, I will say that I'm a little biased too, because I'm a change agent. So I'm always working with leadership teams to do things that they've never done before that we don't have any data to support. And so in those cases, data is still really important, but what's the strategy of where we're trying to go, and how do we benchmark where we are now so that we can measure the value of change against the current status quo? So yes, we need data insights. That's what tells us it's not working. But I'm also trying to think about, where we're trying to go with our budgeting and planning, which is, how do we know whether or not the plan or journey that we've put in place and the budget that we've put in place is driving us towards our goals? Because here we are sitting at the budgeting table at the end of the year saying, well, we didn't hit that goal, our profit margins aren't where we need to be, didn't hit the revenue goal. So what are we going to do differently this year? And we keep the same budgeting process, involve all the same leaders, and try again. And I've worked with teams that have done this 4, 5, 6 years, and they keep being united in how they're approaching the budget, and that they feel united in the vision. But every year they fail to hit the goals. And the thing that I'm constantly challenged by is how do we measure and know that the strategy that we've planned for and budgeted against is working fast enough so that we can optimize it and or adjust it because we set it right now? Does that mean it's set in stone and permanent? Are we just stuck with it for the next year? So, Jeremy, I'm going to let you lead this one because I would really love to hear from your perspective is how do we know that the budget and the plan that we have in place that we're going to be able to measure and trust that it's working? And how is our team going to trust that the budget and plan that we've put in place is working?
Well, I think it comes down to, I mean, I hate to say data again, because it was kind of the same answer, but it kind of is, right? Like I think setting goals and then having the ability to track them effectively and to be able to trust them is again, step one. Even if you're net new strategy, net new product, like we're going in and we don't have any data, I think that's okay. We need, again, we use both of them together. Both blind strategy based on feeling versus not using data. Like I think we can all agree that they're both super important. I mean, from a systems perspective, I'm thinking about it from a data perspective and tracking how well it, and I will say most companies, I'm probably biased because most companies that we work with have trouble doing this. So most of the conversations I'm having are, hey, we'd love to know if we're successful, but we actually don't know if we are. We don't know what marketing strategies or campaigns, or the fact that we sent 3 people to a conference in Vegas. Like we don't know if that actually influenced any new revenue. We have no idea. And so we're kind of just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks without any data or reporting or analytics to tell us that it's working.
Yeah. And we budget for it again, right? That was a really fun conference. We talked to all kinds of people there. We had a grand old time. And we should definitely budget for it again. As a matter of fact, next time I think we need the 50-foot booth so we can have an even bigger crowd in our booth, right? So Simon, that and Susan, that falls into like this high dollar amount that gets budgeted every year that we don't know if it's working, and we just budget for it again the next year. So tell us from your perspective, how can we as leadership teams learn how to put in place this thinking about measurement, thinking about how we're making progress sooner, so that way when it gets to budgeting season, we know where we need to cut costs or where we can expand costs, and we can align to work together better next budgeting season if we don't have that information now.
I'll let Susan go first.
I honestly, if the trade shows and that 50-foot booth is a part of, owned by the marketing team, and the marketing team felt that it was they've got some very high quality leads from that show. Aren't they going to do everything they can to find the data to support that? I mean, it just kind of makes me think of figures lie and liars figure. We'll just do what we can to make that happen, especially since the CEO really enjoys that particular trade show, and it's a great way for the CEO to entertain some of his favorite customers. So it's, I mean, you can also fall into that trap of as with any research, if you want to prove the point, you can find data to support it. So, it's again just bringing us back to wanting to have good, solid, intelligent conversations, and openness, which sadly I don't think happens a lot, but that's where I think it lies.
I agree. I mean, I think measurability is what you're really, we're talking about, right? So you've got to, I mean, everything is a bit of a compromise in business, like in life, right? So you've got to look at it. You've only got a certain amount of money. Where are you going to spend it? But what you described, Tara, is actually, we've all seen it, right? And we all do it. Let's be totally honest, right? People make the argument that, oh, we must go to this conference, even though it costs $80,000, because if we're not there, then it reflects badly on our brand. People will think we've left the market, whatever. So the question then really is, okay, so we're going to go to this thing. We're not going to come back from it like we did last year, where Jeremy said to us, okay, well, what did you make out of it? How many people have you actually sold to afterwards? We're going to start working out how to be more effective about pre-planning for the conference, getting people to come to our booth, all that, doing stuff around the conference, following up afterwards, and measuring absolutely everything so that we can see whether the tactics that we're deploying are actually successful or not. So I think when you look at it like that, you've just got to measure, I guess it's like the carpenters, isn't it? Sort of measure twice, cut once, you just got to keep measuring and looking at A/B testing, figuring out, what actually works better and improving it. And I think also being somewhat ruthless about what you do and don't spend your money on. And I think a big part of budgeting, I mean, Susan said it, I hope jokingly at the beginning, this is the one time of the year where the executives get together. Hopefully it's not the one time, but the bottom line is getting together and hashing this stuff out and agreeing as a group what is actually the most important thing for the business, which pet projects are going to have to be shelved or whatever it is. That stuff is really important. Getting on the same page so that everybody understands, okay, this is the direction we're going to go in, and everyone is going to work towards that same direction, and everyone has to work out on their budgets how they're going to try and do it. And then measuring it, keeping track of it, meeting on a regular basis, using the likes of Jeremy to get the technology so that it works and reports sensible information back to us that we can then actually use to affect changes. I think all those kinds of things are critically important.
You just hit on something that I think is really important, and it impacts all of the departments, even the ones that are not represented here. And it is why people buy, is this fear of missing out. And so many times during the budgeting process, there is this fear of missing out that goes into the budget. I fear that if I don't have that same tech stack that the biggest company in our industry has, then we're missing out on some kind of advantage that tech stack offers that we don't know what it is or how to capitalize on it or what to do with it. Or if we don't go to that geographic market where our largest competitor is winning the day, we're missing out. Or if we don't go to that trade show or don't have this number of people on our sales staff compared to our competitors, we're missing out. And I see so much of that drives budgets, but none of that is aligned to any of the things you guys are talking about as being actually important. So I'll let you guys comment here for a minute and on what you think about that. Like, what are some of the other pitfalls you see or things that people can watch out for in their budgeting conversations that are irrelevant drivers of decisions?
Okay, can I offer two examples of where I can offer more than two, but I'll keep it to two, right? Where your budget doesn't, is not supporting your strategy, or and these are ones that I've seen quite a lot, right? The first one is compensation. So this is related to sales, unsurprisingly, but it's compensation, right? So I see this a lot. We have a strategy that tells us the business wants to do this, and the compensation plan for the salespeople actually incentivizes them to do this, right? So A versus B, and they wonder why they're not actually achieving what it is they want to achieve. So that's a very real thing where strategy and budget, just don't work. And it may be that the budget has meant that we've got to allocate, someone has thought, okay, we need to change the compensation structure to make it more profitable or whatever it is, right? But that's all going to line up in order for you to achieve. And the second one, perhaps more relevant, more broadly, is I see this and have been in businesses where this has happened, where the company decides I'm going to go after a new market. So we're going to enter the United States, or we're going to enter Europe or Canada, whatever it is, right? And they start spending money in terms of hiring people and going after that market, but they allocate nothing additionally to the development budget. Let's say it's a software company, right? To a software development budget to ensure that, or even to the marketing budget, to ensure that actually what they're trying to sell in that new market actually has product market fit. Okay. So there you have a very clear, okay, we've got a strategy, but the budget from the very get-go is going to fail. It's going to hinder you, and you're going to fail to achieve that because you haven't actually thought through all the implications of that, and therefore what you need to have in the budget, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answered your question. I'm slightly worried as I engage on that. Maybe it
No,
didn't.
I think that 100% answers the question. You also hit on what are the impacts to the rest of the organization of the things that we've budgeted, right? So you budget from one perspective and the rest of the departments didn't budget to go in the same direction. That kind of ties it back to the beginning. But Susan, what are your thoughts on this
I was
topic
just
as we
thinking one of the flaws of the typical budgeting process, it's something that happens maybe off cycle, but departments operating on the basis that they had better spend this money, or else they won't get the budget again the next year. And I think we're all laughing. We've all seen it. The departments that feverishly, as it's coming to year end, feverishly spending the money. Strategy be damned, because I want to be sure that I get that. I don't want to lose that budget, because losing that budget can also translate into me losing some of my power. And so that's another. There's a little bit of that reality that needs to be attended to off cycle and throughout the whole season.
Please don't spread that around, Susan, because that is one of the ways in which a lot of sales teams actually meet their goal, for goodness sake. Okay, you're dealing with organizations who've got a little bit of extra budget, and so you get the deal in, this year rather than next year. But yes, you're right.
I was
Find
just gonna
customers.
say that.
I encourage all of that. Customers, should do that. But as in your own business, no, that is a bit of a challenge. But again, yes, we've seen it. But then you can put in incentives to have people spend money smartly, and if they've achieved their goal but actually saved money, there are incentives that you can put in, to encourage that. And the only big caveat I would put in there is be careful again about your incentives, right? You want to be very careful about how you do that kind of thing. Think it through very, very carefully. Think about all the downstream effects of making those kinds of changes, because they can have a sort of law of unintended consequences. But yeah.
So
Yeah.
one example that ties together your comment on compensation and your comment on bonus structure is something that I'm actually rolling out right now, for probably the 5th or 6th time that I've looked to put together a similar bonus program. But for the marketing and sales department to be compensated on company profit is very disincentivizing. They have very little control over that company profit number. And at the end of the year, when their bonus gets arbitrarily picked based on their supposed impact on the profit number, it's very difficult to track. So by breaking that up, what is marketing and sales impact to profit? Cost of customer acquisition. And so you can set a bonus based on a percent of sales, cost of customer acquisition, and you can bonus the difference. You incentivize everybody to manage the budget to manage their profit impact. And then the bonus directly, you hit a higher sales number and you don't spend more than you originally had budgeted, there's a bigger bonus pool. Right? So there's a lot of ways to control incentives with where people have impact as part of the budgeting process. But the thing that a lot of companies don't see is that the instant you publish that budget, it is wrong. And everybody's going to go out and spend on the things that they're going to spend on anyway. And then your whole management team's just trying to rein it in. So, Jeremy, I have to say that has to exist in your space all the time. Like, oh, we heard about this thing at a conference, so we want to do it. Oh, we need a $2,500 monthly upgrade to our software in order to be able to do it.
Just go make it happen. Yeah, just go make it happen. Yeah,
just upgrade.
Jeremy, you can
Done.
Yeah, just go make it happen.
Just give it to ChatGPT. Everything will be fine. Just integrate all your systems. Just like buy what you need, and like we'll just cobble it together. And I'm sure we'll get a good result out of that.
Absolutely.
I will tell you, this conversation is making me hate the idea of annual planning. I feel like, and I'm just going back to my product management, engineering, going back to the nerdy technical brain that is rattling around ideas up here. It almost feels like annual planning and annual budgeting is not exactly the best way to do it. Like, it almost feels like it has to happen on a quarterly basis. And I think as it relates to systems, usually the priorities of the business change so frequently that it would be impossible to set a goal or a forecast at the beginning of the year and expect you to hit that forecast at the end of the year. And this is why, like, especially with my company, I don't set, a lot of people say, hey, have like a 5-year business plan, a 10-year business plan. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be here then. I'm hopeful that I didn't win the lottery and but at the same time, it's like, it's so far in advance. You don't know what's going to happen yet. How much time are you wasting trying to guess the future than actually thinking about the immediate future? What's happening over the next 3 to 6 months? It almost feels to me like, just like RevOps and iterating on your go-to-market motion and the tools you're using, it almost seems like you need to be iterating on your budget throughout the year. If one of the mistakes I think you could make is waiting until November or October to start having these conversations, and then trying to, because you don't have enough time to dig into the data and talk with your team, and it just becomes, well, this is what we did last year, so let's just build off of it. And I think that's where we get into the conversation that you're talking about, which is more like, if you don't spend the budget, you're not going to get it next year, right? That's the conversation it becomes. But it seems like, just in this conversation, it seems relatively silly that we do this.
Listen, I think, everyone does it. I think the annual budget has to probably stick, but you're absolutely right about looking at it on an ongoing basis, right? That's key. Yeah. And the other thing is, I think when you're putting together your annual budget, it's worth looking at different scenarios, right? If this happens, if that happens, right? So you've got a minimum, viable, and then, top of the line sort of budget scenario. But it's then worth, and I think probably most businesses, I hope most businesses do this, you then build in sort of key points at which, if you've achieved a certain thing or haven't achieved a certain thing, then other either expenditure can occur, or certain areas are going to get trimmed as you go through. So I think what you're talking about, I mean, I don't think you could have a quarter by quarter budget and then just worry about it. That would just be exhausting. And this discussion that you are not enjoying, and I don't know many people that actually really enjoy the idea of budgeting, would be occurring every 3 months. So, but I do think that when it comes down to monitoring, that's really the key thing, right? And a lot of the businesses that I've been involved in have either boards or management committees or executive boards, whatever you want to call them. But it's hopefully a group of experts or professionals in their relevant fields who actually understand and own their part of the business, and they come together on at least a monthly basis and look at this stuff and make decisions about what they're going to do in the business. That is really important, and I think it's really critical that those people are transparent and have the ability to respect for each other, and are able to sort of make what are sometimes very difficult decisions on a regular basis. I think it's like, I'm a sailor, right? You don't set your course across the Atlantic and then just stick to that compass heading. There are all kinds of things that can hit you as you go across the Atlantic, and you need to keep adjusting all the time. Otherwise, you will not end up in the Caribbean. You'll end up in, whatever, South America.
Really quick, I do want to ask the attendees if there's any questions, please type them into the chat or into the Q&A box. We will be glad to take any questions while we wrap up the call today. And it's been great to have so many people here on this panel who have so much experience. And I'm actually in the middle of budgeting for 3 different companies right now as a consultant and as an owner, and I'm taking nuggets away from here that I'm going to go put to work right away. And I have been a budgeting professional for 15 years. So I'd love to, as we're getting questions in, answer that, but also when we need filler, like let's talk about key takeaways. We do have a question here is, what do you do when a top-down budget comes with the directive to increase sales while cutting costs? Oh my gosh, I've gotten that one a ton of times. Increase sales and cut costs. That's what the business objective is for the year. That's the strategy, the plan and budgeting.
Genius. Okay, well, I can attempt that one. Listen, yes, we've all heard it. We've got to do more with less, and I think you just have to be realistic about it. Everyone has to go and get back together again and have another conversation. It's no good. You need to do it, in my opinion, as a group again, right? Okay, so we're trying to do more with less. You then got to go around and figure out, okay, where can you trim realistically, right? Where can you get Jeremy to say, okay, well, what technology can we use to improve our ability to generate sales or increase profit margins or whatever? And I think it needs everyone to come back together and discuss it, and potentially, actually, sometimes it's really hard, right, or not possible. So you have to come back and say, all right, how are we going to adjust our vision or our strategy for this coming year in order to increase our profit margin? Maybe we do, maybe it's not possible.
The answer is creating a system that makes you more efficient with the people that you have.
Yeah.
And that's why revenue operations is a household name. Just what it is. And I think this is why we're seeing a big push towards AI. And I'm even seeing it almost on the ground floor, especially with tech startups that are, maybe seed, Series A, very small, under 100 people. They're able to generate a lot more revenue than their counterparts did 5 years ago because they have systems in place. They're building their business around super efficient processes and tech. They don't need to hire 2x people to get the same result. So when we ask the question, top-down budget, hey, you have less and I need you to do more. First of all, it's unfair. And I think a realistic, anyone who's realistic knows that you need money to make money. And that's just what it is as a business owner. So I think it's unfair to begin with. But the answer, the realistic only answer is to be as efficient as possible. And that's where RevOps comes into play.
And that's also where we have to be realistic as business leaders. I'm all for bottom line, but you have to make investments in these changes. You have to invest in understanding the tech stack you need, and then you have to invest in putting it in, and then you have to invest in training your people to use it. And all of those things are going to cost more for the time being if you want to still be able to maintain business as usual and implement change simultaneously. So there is a real conflict in we want to do more with less without investing in putting in the infrastructure and training our people on how to do more with less. So we have another question here in the chat. So I know siloed tech stack components is a big deal. Many companies have duplicative technologies, much of which is only partially utilized or lives in one department. And how do you handle that from a cost reduction and consolidation perspective, Jeremy?
Yep. So this is a great question. And we go through, I mentioned the utilization exercise. So that's definitely one thing that you want to do. Part of that exercise is not just how many licenses you're paying, you're paying for, when is the renewal contract. It's which departments are using it. You visualize that in your customer journey. I can't tell you how many customers and clients that I've worked with throughout my career, in-house consulting, over the last 12 years. If I say, what's your customer journey? They don't have a full picture of how someone finds the business. How do they start engaging and building trust with the business, getting respect, becoming a hand raiser, talking with the right people, getting the right information, building trust in order enough to say yes, then renewing year over year over year, becoming an evangelist for the company. They don't have that. What they have is a process for each individual department. They might have a Lucid chart or a Miro board for the sales process, but it's not connected to how we're going to maintain them as a customer in CS. And so after you do your utilization, what you want to do is you want to overlap your technology and process together into a single tool. The tool that we use internally is called Puzzle. It's puzzleapp.io. It's a RevOps focused Lucid chart on steroids. It is unbelievable. So what we'll do with our customers is we'll put a process like on a node, and you can actually tie in a system to that tool. So you can see, okay, if there's a HubSpot process, and then add documentation. So it's like a combination of your tech stack, your customer journey, and documentation for your team. Once you document out the customer journey, it's very clear what tools are revenue generating or helping you reach your goals and which ones are not. A good example, not to call any specific tool out, but a tool like SalesLoft or Outreach as an example, it used to be that we could download 10,000 contacts from ZoomInfo, load them into an email campaign, and hit go. And we might get a 2% response. Of that 2%, maybe 40% have a demo. We might close a couple new customers. Great, that's fine. It doesn't work that way. Just look at your LinkedIn messages and your emails, and like everyone's doing that. It doesn't work that way anymore. And so customers are moving away from those tools and being more specialized, or how they can build better content on social, and how they can have webinars like this to engage with the community, to build that trust and respect, rather than just sending a cold email, right? So but you first need the customer journey and need to understand how customers get from landing on your site all the way through purchasing and renewing.
Yeah.
So I think that is a great wrap up that kind of brings it all together for how all of the departments and all of the company is delivering value to the buyer journey. The tech stack, the budget, the strategy, it all has to work on scaling that buyer journey, right? And not losing the goodness of it. Lots of times you can scale and lose your secret sauce, the things that are critical to your customer experience. And that all has to be budgeted for. And so as we wrap up today, I think we've learned that there's a lot to consider. And I hope that people on this call are hearing that you might have gaps in your leadership team, things that people don't have experience in or might not know about, or you might need an outside perspective. I know we're all going to call Jeremy. Every time I walk into a tech stack mess, I'm calling Jeremy, because I mean, that's great. I love that that is a piece of it, Jeremy. I love that compensation planning is just critical, Simon. And Susan, the whole go to market and how all of the pieces have to change and shift depending on what the market direction is that we're going. All those things are highly specialized. And as a leader in a business, I can identify gaps. So I appreciate all of you bringing your expertise together. If you want to learn more about anybody who is on this call, they each have a whole dedicated page on atomicrevenue.com. So you can go read about all of their backgrounds. You can send them a request to connect. You can even book a meeting directly on their calendar. So if you want more information from Simon, Susan, or Jeremy, just go to the atomicrevenue.com About Us page and you can see their profile. Philip just dropped it into the chat, so you can go get more questions answered from any of them. And then we also have a revenue operations assessment. And for us, revenue operations is all aspects of how revenue comes into your business. The way Jeremy was explaining, the buyer journey, all the people, all the tech stack, everything that happens is our view of what businesses need in order to grow and succeed in the revenue and profit space. So we have a revenue operations assessment process that anyone on this call or anyone else on our fractional leader team can take you through to help you kind of prioritize the opportunities for budgeting next year or the opportunities for improvement. If you have money to invest, where should we invest it first? So if you have interest in meeting with anybody about that process as your team is thinking about budgeting and you're realizing you have some needs, please feel free to go in and request that revenue operations assessment, and we'll be glad to help you with prioritizing where to spend and where to stop spending related to the greatest opportunities and low-hanging fruit for you. So with that, thank you, Simon, Susan, and Jeremy. We have to do more of these. This was a really big topic for a very short time.
Yeah, it was
Thank you
great.
so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
very much. Thanks for everyone
Okay.
for joining.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.